This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Lo Kwei-Su. Tonight's top stories: more tools in monetary policy plus proactive fiscal and macro settings. Detail from China's key finance officials on how they intend to reach targets laid out in the government work report. Extending the middle power movement beyond a speech at Davos, Canada's Prime Minister takes his message on tour to India, Australia and now Japan. The Iran war in its seventh day, markets remain on edge even as the US waivers for Russian crude help to cool oil prices. Washington warns against miscalculation on its Iranian offensive as many countries step up repatriation of nationals caught up in a widening conflict. And also tonight, Iranian and Lebanese citizens living in Hong Kong speak about grief and growing anxiety about conflict in their homeland. And China's Spring Festival Gala dazzled millions with a futuristic robot spectacle. Is this a sign of tech dominance or just carefully staged precision? CNA's Insight does a reality check. China's top economic officials detail plans for growth, trade and tech development on the sidelines of key political meetings known as the Two Sessions. Pan Gongsheng, governor of the People's Bank of China, says the central bank will flexibly use monetary policy tools to support growth and stabilize markets this year. Mr. Pan warns geopolitical tensions such as the war in Iran have triggered a rise in risk aversion, leading to sharp volatility in the US dollar and other currencies.
人民银行将认真落实好中央部署，实施好适度宽松的货币政策，把促进经济稳定增长、物价合理回升作为货币政策的重要考量，灵活高效地运用降准、降息等多种货币政策工具，发挥增量政策和存量政策、货币政策与财政政策的集成协同效应，为实现“十五五”良好开局营造良好的货币金融环境。
China and Hong Kong stocks closing higher despite the gains, both markets ending the week lower as geopolitical risk weighed on sentiment and policy signals from the annual parliamentary meeting offered very few surprises. Let's bring in CNA senior correspondent Tan Yu-Guan. He's live from Beijing. Yu-Guan, China's Commerce Minister signaling a push to welcome more foreign companies. What might Beijing do more to better position itself to attract overseas investment?
Well, the minister positioned China and reminded those present that China is the world's second largest market globally, and in terms of purchasing power, it will be the largest in the world. He says that China's market is not only big, it is also a great place for foreign companies to strengthen their business, calling China a gym for them. Let's take a listen.
欢迎呢更多的企业到中国来投资啊。前面讲过，下一个中国还是中国啊。现在中国不仅是外资啊一个盈利的一个地方，他们看成是一个健身房啊，以及一个试验场啊。试验场，很多外资企业啊到中国来。 就像健身房一样，健身强体跟我们企业啊这个共同的、平等的、公平的竞争啊，这样就是健身。同时呢，我们有超大规模的市场，有非常丰富的场景啊，这个就成为外资企业各种创新啊研发的一个试验场。
Well, that news conference you just saw there was really quite a bladderbuster. It lasted for over 2.5 hours, and it began with just Q&A with no preamble, and that lasted for over 2.5 hours. The running theme has been China will keep the country open for foreign investors, and it would especially welcome investments in the sectors that were raised in the 15th Five-Year Plan. They include emerging industries like new generation information technology, including integrated circuits, new energy, new materials, new energy vehicles, robotics, biomedicine, and high-end equipment, aviation and aerospace, and as well, they also welcome investments in so-called future industries named in the 15th Five-Year Plan. They include quantum technology, biomanufacturing, hydrogen energy, nuclear fusion power, brain-computer interfaces, embodied AI, as well as 6G mobile communications and future energy. What's more, the market will expand further, with China vowing today that it will release the potential of lower-tier cities in terms of consumption. And meanwhile, China's central bank vows to keep the yuan steady and said it would not manipulate the currency to gain a competitive advantage. I think these are news that will be welcomed by investors. Wei Su?
All right. Rhetoric like this we've heard for a good while, but in this parliamentary meeting, we're seeing more concrete measures rolled out to meet those objectives, such as you mentioned, boosting consumption and driving innovation in technology. How soon might we see these measures actually taking effect?
Well, in terms of when they will take effect, well, China is doubling down on linking tech industries with financing, with measures such as trying to develop the so-called GEM growth enterprise market, including their precise listing procedures, financing mechanism, improve regulation covering application acceptance, and to make sure fraud doesn't happen. Meanwhile, the chairman of the China Securities Regulatory Commission also vowed to make capital markets more stable and to develop diverse capital markets to improve their quality and structure of companies, to improve their investability, and therefore make investing in China more worthwhile for investors. Wei Su?
Oh, thanks for that. CNA senior correspondent Tan Yuguan live there from Beijing. And Betty Wang joins us now. She's head of Northeast Asia Research at Oxford Economics. Thanks for joining us, Ms. Wang.
Thank you.
I'll hear from our correspondent there a laundry list of what China has already done and what China still intends to do. But one figure we all looked at, and it's followed up today, backed up by concrete measures, is that very significant lowering of expected GDP growth. For you, what did that signal?
Sure, thanks for having me. I think growth target is definitely something that market pays a lot of attention on this, the two sessions. So from our observation, I think first of all, it's definitely a modest downgrade of China's growth target from around 5% set last year to 4.5 to 5% range growth target. So that is actually broadly in line with market expectations and confirms that the policymakers are increasingly willing to tolerate slower growth for higher quality growth.
I'm going to pick you up on that. Even under Hu Jintao, so there's a good 10 years, right? Before, we have seen emphasis on do not pursue breakneck growth. We want high quality growth. So how is this significant? We've already been hearing this and presumably seeing policies supporting this for so many years.
Well, that's true in terms of the growth numbers. If we recall back what happened to China and what the growth numbers have registered over years, especially for the past 10 years or so, China's growth rate has consistently slowed down. But I would say that probably because of two reasons. So first is China's GDP scale has increasingly expanded. So if we use PPP, the purchasing power measure, China's GDP growth, the GDP scale is actually bigger than the US. So it's not realistic to request China to continuously grow at the same level that we saw like 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. So that is on the scale side. And on the other hand, structurally, China has adopted this investment and manufacturing or the export-led growth models for years. But increasingly, both the policymakers domestically and also external market have expected that China should transition from this investment-led to consumption-led growth models, which should help China to sustain the growth momentum. So assuming that China will be gradually transitioning towards this consumption-led growth model, obviously there will be some challenges to be encountered with, and hence the growth rates will be gradually slowing down. So the challenges could be structural-wise. For example, when you want to cultivate some new growth models, you will have to sacrifice some of the old models, which China might be comfortable in the past. So there might introduce challenges in terms of how to navigate the labor market transition, how to navigate the industrial structure reallocations, and how to reallocate those resources across different sectors. So all these are challenges that China needs to encounter domestically, and let alone those external challenges that we have increasingly dealt with. For example, the tariff uncertainties and the quickly evolving global landscapes that China will need to navigate with.
So whatever gains that China makes because of new moves, so for example, a shift to domestic consumption, a shift to tech innovation, can that make up for the loss of actual GDP when you move away from export-driven growth? Does it make up for that?
Yeah, well, if you look at the growth numbers, of course, we won't expect China will return to the high-speed growth anytime soon, or even in the next decades. We actually expect China's growth to consistently slow down. So if we use that numbers, it might not bring China back to those fast-speed growth period anymore. But if China successfully implement or deploy those technology into the broad economy, it could at least help China to deal with some of the structural disadvantage, such as aging population, the diminishing demographic advantages. So the improvement in the productivity will help China to encounter those difficulties.
But not fully mitigating the difficulties posed by the challenges that you mentioned.
Well, I would say that it might, instead of just purely considering the scale, we also need to consider how long that China will manage to get that to be offset. So that might be, induce a long period of time for China to gradually implement those technologies, and we see that reflected into the productivity. So if we put that time horizon longer, so of course it won't completely offset the short-term setback in China's economy.
All right. I realize the attention is on figures from yesterday for the fiscal inflation, but today we've got this press conference, and we were sharing the headline announcements from that, as my colleague mentioned, bladder-busting press conference. In your experience, are we missing something that the press conference perhaps emphasized, and yet media is concentrating on one message to the neglect of another?
Yes, if there's one thing that I would like to bring up, and which might be underappreciated by some of the media reports over the past couple of days, I would bring up China's continued emphasis on its opening up its domestic market, and also to strengthen the regional cooperations. I think there's a lot of emphasis on China's, self-sufficiency on tech sectors, but I don't see too much of emphasis on this opening up policies. And if we connect that with China's rising consumer market, the messages and the business implications might be clearer. So that is, China cannot be only viewed as a supply side producer, but also increasingly become a source of demand. Especially, I think this is very important, especially when China are increasingly willing to open up its markets.
And a final question here. We've heard this again months, possibly years, the difficulty with bringing confidence or animal spirits back to the Chinese market.
Yeah.
Do you see moves this time, final question, that could sort out a much more difficult problem than just sorting out supply and demand in the financial markets? Final question.
Yeah, well, in sum or in short, the government work report and all the messages that we've received from the government, from the two sessions so far, has broadly addressed market concerns in directions at least. But of course, the key will be executions. So let's see.
All right. Execution or implementation.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Betty Wang, Head of Northeast Asia Research at Oxford Economics. Thanks for coming in this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on this bulletin, Asia's largest manufacturing economy is racing to secure new supplies of oil as the Mideast conflict chokes the flow. Plus, global investors pulling money out of Asian stock markets at the fastest pace in nearly 4 years as they reassess risk amid ongoing conflict in the Middle East.
If we are just going to be just any other steakhouse, bro, I tell you, we don't do.
3 months later, we decided to open again. There, we also failed.
You can't afford to make a mistake because it's going to be a very expensive mistake.
This is what I think a lot of people don't see, the amount of stress that we go through.
I'll always regret if I don't try something that I really want to do.
It's all about whether you have it in you or you don't have it in you.
I got the knowledge. Am I going to throw it away because I failed?
After 4.5 years of baking, I can actually actualize my dream to open up a takeaway shop.
Fuguran sells Asian-inspired rice bowls.
Kick is a garlic chili crunch.
I'm running an F&B brand in Surabaya and planning to expand in Singapore.
We are working together to open a wood fire grill concept in a coffee shop setting.
The fear of failing is very high.
Everybody must know our story.
This is my journey.
My journey.
My journey?
Playing the long game.
The long game.
We're in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics. Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos? We're pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
My dad is turning 90 and my mom is 70 as their only child and sole caregiver.
I'm on duty 24/7.
My mom has dementia. I just have to be sure that she doesn't go out.
I'm pretty much caught up with my caregiving and work. It's probably why my marriage ended.
What happens when you're left to care? A new series featuring caregivers starting 7th March on CNA.
Welcome back to East Asia Tonight. It's time to get up to speed in business with CNA's Olivia Mazuki.
Well, Wei Su, we're talking about oil prices. It is pulling back after 6 days now. So it's finally easing after the U.S. considers intervening in futures markets. Washington also issued waivers for Russian oil purchases to ease supply strains in the Middle East. After earlier declines, Brent now regaining some steam, standing at $87 a barrel, WTI standing at 84.60 cents. Both contracts have surged a lot by this week, double-digit gains there. They are on track for the steepest weekly increase since February 2022. Fears of a prolonged conflict disrupting energy flows have heightened concerns over supply and economic fallout for oil and gas-dependent economies. Asia's manufacturing powerhouses are racing to secure new supplies, conserve stockpiles, and coordinate support. China has ordered its biggest refiners to suspend most oil and gas product exports. Taiwan, which imports over 90% of its fossil fuels, plans a mutual assistance framework with Japan and South Korea. Well, Japan is setting up a special office in Tokyo to manage supplies. South Korea says it will activate emergency energy protocols. It imports 70% of its crude and 20% of its LNG from the Middle East, mostly via Hormuz. Well, Indonesia is increasing U.S. crude purchases to reduce reliance on the Middle East. India, Thailand, Singapore, and the Philippines have also raised supply concerns. The U.S. granted waivers allowing companies to buy sanctioned Russian oil to ease supply constraints. The first waivers went to Indian refiners, which have since bought millions of barrels of Russian crude, reversing months of pressure to curb such purchases. U.S. President Donald Trump hinting at taking further action to tame surging oil prices.
Further action to reduce pressure on oil is imminent, and the oil seems to have pretty much stabilized. We had it very low, but I had to take this little detour if it's okay with everybody. Scott, it's okay with you? Scott's the one who has to put up with it. He said, you have to do this now? I said, I have to do it, Scott, right? But it's been very strong, and everybody, including Scott, everybody feels we had really no choice. They were going to hit us if we didn't hit them because they're crazy. And in the long term, the actions we're taking will dramatically increase the stability of the region and oil prices and stock markets and everything else.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has warned oil refiners against colluding, and that comes after sudden surges in the retail price of fuel following the U.S.-Israel attacks on Iran. The retail market typically lags behind oil prices globally for about 2 to 3 weeks, but local reports say the hike took place almost immediately after. Average pump price for a liter of petrol has risen nearly 9% since about a week ago. President Lee said that in a social media post, price collusion is a serious crime and threatened heavy consequences on producers that are involved. South Korea's antitrust regulator has announced that it will be conducting inspections across petrol stations nationwide. The Fair Trade Commission added that on-site investigations will be taken immediately for a comprehensive response. Japanese and South Korean markets reversed steep losses after their governments moved to ease energy supply concerns. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 ended 0.6% higher, and the Kospi there closed a little change. And Japan's finance minister said the government stands ready to act swiftly, including compiling an extra budget. South Korea secured a deal with the UAE to ship about 4 million barrels of oil to bolster supplies. Still, the overall investor sentiment remains undermined by the conflict. The Kospi lost about 10% in volatile trading this week. But even amid a broad risk-off mood globally, analysts noted heavy concentration in 2 memory chip giants. Sensitivity to energy shocks left them especially vulnerable. The Nikkei wrapping up the week 4% lower. Tensions in Iran have shaken confidence across markets. Global investors are pulling their money out of Asian equities at the fastest pace in almost 4 years. Data compiled by Bloomberg shows foreign funds dumped about $11 billion worth of shares in developing Asia this week, the biggest weekly outflow since 2022. Taiwan was hit the hardest, with record funds pulled out at almost $8 billion. Around $1.6 billion gone from South Korea's Kospi, some $1.3 billion moved out of India. The wave of withdrawals has sparked sharp losses across the region. The MSCI Asia-Pacific Index is down more than 6% this week, its worst in nearly 6 years. It is a dramatic turnaround from the recent Sell America, Buy Asia trade, as investors rethink earlier bets on a weaker dollar and cooling inflation. With oil prices climbing and much of Asia reliant on Middle Eastern energy supplies, inflation could flare up again, adding even more uncertainty to already volatile markets. Well, China and India are among top shippers of billions of dollars worth of cars into the Middle East, but that flow may slowly hit the brakes. With the U.S.-Israel-Iran war now in its 7th day, security concerns have effectively paused shipments along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, the Strait of Hormuz. It is a transport channel that plays a vital role for Asian automakers. China exported more than 8 million vehicles last year. That includes EV brands like BYD and Geely. About 1.4 million Chinese cars, roughly 1 in 6, went to places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Well, the Middle East is the second largest market for China as it looks to offset weak demand at home. India exported $8.8 billion worth of cars, with about a quarter heading to the Middle East. Indian-made Hyundai is the most exposed, with half of its 2025 global shipments from India going to the Gulf. In its record year of car exports, South Korea shipped more than $5 billion worth of vehicles to the Middle East in 2025. Meanwhile, a Japanese auto giant Toyota alone exported more than 320,000 cars to the region. Speaking of Toyota, it is reportedly producing about 40,000 fewer vehicles bound for the Middle East, citing logistical concerns amid the current conflicts. So, a prolonged disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could send ripple effects all the way to Asia, forcing car makers to change gear as export production and eventually revenue begin to stall. Vietnam's third largest telecom operator, Mobifone, is reportedly eyeing potential deals with Chinese tech firms to grow part of its 5G network as the U.S. continues to warn of security risks. The police-owned Mobifone is said to have plans to roll out advanced antennas for its 5G infrastructure. Deal talks are reportedly ongoing with China's Huawei, and similar 5G deals were signed last year between other Vietnamese telecom operators and Chinese tech firms. A U.S. State Department spokesperson said these deals are a security risk around allowing Chinese intelligence access to sensitive data. And Vietnam had joined the U.S. government's Clean Network move back in 2020, committing against the use of Chinese 5G equipment. But it later downplayed the risks, saying that Chinese telecom equipments are cheaper and reliable. These potential deals come ahead of an expected visit by Vietnam's top leader, Tô Lâm, to China in the coming weeks. Anyway, Sue, that's all I have for business. Back to you.
And thanks for that, Olivia. We're still ahead on this bulletin. The U.S. says it has only just begun amid concerns among Gulf nations on continued capacity to fend off strikes from Iran. China, Japan and South Korea step up efforts to bring citizens in the Middle East back home.
As Asia wakes up to a new day, get up to speed with major events shaping lives in the region and other parts of the world.
Putting things in perspective with eye-opening reports and expert analysis as a new era of global politics breeds power struggles and shifting alliances.
We get to the heart of the matter and take stock of the issues you're invested in with on-the-ground reports and wall-to-wall coverage.
Viewing it all from a regional lens because we put Asia first.
Oh, this is East Asia Tonight, and these are the headlines. China's central bank pledges to use monetary tools flexibly and efficiently to shield the country's financial markets from volatility spurred by the war in Iran. That uncertainty leaving markets on edge, oil pulling back slightly as Washington issues temporary waivers for Russian crude to ease constraints on supply. And Canada's Prime Minister lands in Tokyo for the final leg of his Asia-Pacific tour, seeking to unite the world's middle powers. Security, economic ties, and the Iran war expected to be high on Mark Carney's agenda. Mark Carney touching down in Tokyo for a brief but high-stakes visit. Talks this hour are expected to focus on strengthening security and economic ties. Japanese media report both sides want to expand intelligence sharing on Chinese and Russian cyber attacks, step up joint military drills, and cooperate on securing critical minerals. Carney expected to press for more Japanese investment in Canada's auto sector. A visit follows Mr. Carney's January visit to China, striking a deal to allow thousands of Chinese electric vehicles into Canada. Analysts say Tokyo has been watching closely given its tensions with China and its significant investments in Canada. Japan is the final step of Mark Carney's Indo-Pacific tour aimed at diversifying trade and deepening partnerships beyond the United States. Well, we're joined by Veena Najibullah. She's Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada. Well, thanks for joining us this evening. This Indo-Pacific...
Thank you so much for the invitation.
All right. This Indo-Pacific tour, Asia-Pacific tour, depending how you want to call it, could we say that India, Australia and Japan, Prime Minister Carney has saved the best, potentially the most straightforward for the last?
Absolutely. In this short, less than 24-hour trip, Prime Minister Carney is going to try to do a lot to deepen and elevate an already strong partnership with Japan. A lot is on the agenda, from economic issues like critical minerals and energy to defense and security partnership. In the last year, Canada and Japan have done a lot to strengthen their defense and security partnerships, and we should be hearing more around how that's going to deepen around cybersecurity and additional defense industrial cooperation. So this is by far perhaps the easiest part of the trip, meaning that the relations are already good, but this is an opportunity to elevate those relations.
Given, as you say, already strong ties, but they, in fact, it is surprising that they are not given potential and incentive even stronger between Canada and Japan.
Absolutely. But I think there is now a recognition that in the current global environment, given the weaponization of supply chains and the turbulence that exists, including this most recent developments in the Middle East, there is a lot that Japan and Canada can do together. Just last year, Canada, for the first time, was able to export its energy to Asia. LNG Canada now is able to supply liquefied natural gas to Japan and others in Asia. And I think that was a game changer in the economic relations. And certainly Prime Minister Carney is going to want to see discussions around that, both in terms of investments in additional infrastructure to be able to get more of Canadian energy to Asia, as well as discussions around critical minerals, for instance, and how to build supply chains that are more resilient and not dependent on only one partner. So I think there are a lot of conversations to be had, including in a frank exchange just between the two leaders. They'll have a working dinner together. And I think there will be, in addition to talking about middle power diplomacy, there's going to be a lot of conversation about the two great powers, Canada's relationship with the US and the challenges we're facing now on trade, and of course, Japan's relations with China. So the two leaders will have an opportunity to exchange views on how they see those evolving situations.
All right. Prime Minister Carney will have had a taste of what Japan might ask him privately, if not publicly, questions in India about where he stands on China, given the deal signed in January involving electric vehicles, which we mentioned, and Canadian agriculture. Japan might be asking those same tough questions.
Absolutely. So Prime Minister Carney had a significant visit to China earlier this year, where he was able to stabilize relations and to reach a deal that will allow a certain 49,000 Chinese EVs into the Canadian market. But I think more importantly, there is a desire, obviously, on the part of Canada to do more commercially with China. But it is not a relationship which is as wide and deep in its focus as, for instance, even the relationship with India. But those discussions still need to happen. I think Japan would want to understand how Canada is viewing its evolving Indo-Pacific strategy, what will be Canada's perspective on the situation in South China Sea and the military buildup of China. So I think there's absolutely a need to have a conversation of what Canada's new strategic partnership with China really means and its implications for Japan's economic interests in Canada. As you know, 77% of cars that are produced in Canada are produced by Japanese companies. So they have a huge stake in Canada's auto sector, and the introduction of Chinese EVs into the Canadian market has ramifications on that.
And where Canada might be able to deliver, certainly in Asia, where trade really is policy, Canada is the one link between as a European-Canadian free trade deal, and of course Canada is part of the CPTPP. Mark Carney has made it very clear he wants to be a bridging link between these two trade deals. If he can do that, that would be a big deal for Asia.
Absolutely. That would be critical. And of course, Japan is also an important member of the CPTPP. And Prime Minister Carney in the last year has been talking about bridging CPTPP and EU countries, recognizing that with the two major powers, both the US and China now being more protectionist and not following rules-based trade, that middle powers need an alternative, and that the best way to do that is to bring these two rules-based trading blocks, the CPTPP and the European Union, together. So that is an idea that Prime Minister Carney has been promoting as part of his middle power diplomacy. We'll see what those discussions look like in Japan. But of course, Japan being the biggest economy in CPTPP would need to be behind that idea.
A final question. If it's we're talking about middle power diplomacy, Australia, India, and Japan, pretty much middle powers, textbook middle powers, although India would be probably the least middle of those middle powers. Is there a fear that the stress on pragmatism could take the meaning out of genuine middle power alignment? Final question.
Yeah, I think on this trip, we will really see Prime Minister Carney pushing this agenda around middle powers. But with Japan, relations with the U.S. are critical. So I think there will also be a lot of discussions on Canada-U.S. relations, especially the negotiations around the Canada-U.S.-Mexico agreement. Japan is perhaps a country outside of North America with the most stake in seeing that agreement continue. So while middle power diplomacy will be very much on the agenda, there's no avoiding conversations about big powers, particularly the U.S. and China.
Thanks. Veena Najibullah, Vice President of Research and Strategy at the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada. Thank you for joining us this evening. The U.S. warning of a surge in attacks on Iran. The Secretary of Defense insisting the battle has only just started, refuting as a miscalculation suggestions that Washington might not be able to keep up the fight.
When we say more to come, it's more fighter squadrons, it's more capabilities, it's more defensive capabilities, and it's more bomber pulses more frequently. The amount of firepower over Iran and over Tehran is about to surge dramatically.
And Tehran on its side showing no signs of backing down, launching a fresh wave of missiles and drones on Arab states in the Gulf. Multiple explosions reported in the skies above Qatar, triggering an emergency response, urging people to take shelter. The defense minister confirming efforts to intercept incoming missiles. Attacks also reported in the UAE, Bahrain, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and yesterday, Azerbaijan. Two drones reportedly targeting Azerbaijan's autonomous Nakhchivan enclave. This has crossed the border from Iran, opening yet another front in the battle. Tehran has denied any responsibility. A plane carrying South Korean citizens being evacuated from the UAE is expected to land this hour in Seoul. South Korean Foreign Minister saying today that talks with the UAE are ongoing to introduce additional chartered flights. The minister adding that some 3,000 citizens are stranded in the UAE and that Korea-bound flights from the country operate only just the once a day. Japan's foreign ministry yesterday saying it will dispatch flights to evacuate nationals from the region as early as next week. Evacuees will board buses in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar and the UAE to airports in Riyadh and Muscat, where they will then be flown home. Chinese foreign ministry officials also ramping up efforts to repatriate stranded nationals, coordinating with airlines and aviation authorities.
在各方共同努力下，相关工作取得了积极进展。3月4日晚，载有近300名中国公民的外航航班自迪拜安全飞抵广州。5日起，国航、东航、南航、海航陆续恢复至阿联酋、阿曼、沙特等国的往返航班。我们再次郑重提醒，当前中东局势仍复杂严峻，存在较大的不确定性。
And a flight carrying about 250 Taiwan residents arrived in Taipei from Dubai late Thursday. The island says more than 100 nationals still remain in the UAE. Iranians and Lebanese living in Hong Kong grappling with anxiety over this crisis with no clear end in their homelands.
Behzad Mirzai has called Hong Kong home for nearly 3 decades now, but he still has family back in his homeland, Iran. His mother, who's almost 80, is still there. She is simply too frail to seek refuge outside of Tehran. And he's been trying to reach her since the US and Israel began their attack on Iran.
I have not been able to communicate directly, so I have to use different friends who have access to internet, send voice messages and receive back the messages. Not constantly, once a day or twice a day. And then I see her voice is devastating, traumatized, lack of sleep. And I could hear the way he reacted. He said the bombs is close by and the sounds are very scary. Sometimes the voices of the bomb last for 5 to 10 minutes before it stops. And he said it's non-stop. It's basically in the last 5 days, she could not sleep.
The situation back home is taking a toll on him.
After few hours, only few hours of sleep, when I wake up, the first thing I come to tears is my mother. Yeah, this is the situation for me personally. So I don't know how long does it last, but I hope it stops. It's my mother.
Behzad Mirzai is one of around 200 Iranians living here in Hong Kong. Some are students, others work here. Born and raised in Iran, Niazi Masood used to be a professional wrestler. He now teaches the sport and also heads the Hong Kong China Wrestling Association. He moved to Hong Kong 8 years ago for a job opportunity. He's been trying to find out how his family and friends are doing.
So, unfortunately, in the past 2 months, I couldn't really talk to my parents or my friends, but just very short time. So, especially these few days, I just could talk to them, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Unfortunately, one of my best friends got killed in the last protest. Were in front of the house, So, I lost my dear friends.
For Lebanese chef Najib Fakoui, who has been working in Hong Kong for 5 years, the war unfolding in the Middle East is also weighing heavily on him. Lebanon became embroiled when the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah attacked Israel in response to the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
And all my family there. Yeah, we are very worried, especially now they closed the airport and no more flights to Middle East from here. We plan to go in Easter to Lebanon, but I think I hope not stay for a long time.
The war has killed now more than 1,000 people in Iran, more than 120 in Lebanon, according to officials. And it is unclear how long the fighting will go on for and how it will eventually leave Iran. In January, Iranian protesters started clashing with the security forces. This was the deadliest domestic unrest since Iran's 1979 revolution ushered in the rule of the Ayatollahs. The death toll varies wildly. Officially, about 3,000 were killed. Other estimates say many more died.
Many people, around 40,000 people, get killed in the last protest, just last month. This is one of the reasons also USA getting engaged and try to involve with the situation, because this is something that is not acceptable for anyone,
But there are also those who question the consequences, with the US and Israel deliberately targeting the Iranian leadership.
We have witnessed many times. Many leaders got killed, but they rise again and again and again. So it's not gonna by bombing or killing the spiritual leader. Actually, they become even stronger. Those people who misunderstand this by eliminating a bunch of, let's say, leaders or generals or killing, gonna help to shuffle, or what do you call it, shovel the country politically, I think they misunderstand. I think they go read the history.
We have more on the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on our website, cna.asia, and on our mobile app, including this commentary on the effect of the war on Washington's pivot to Asia. And still on East Asia tonight, Japan demands the swift return of nationals detained in Iran after confirming that a second citizen is being held. And acrobatic robots taking center stage at China's Spring Festival Gala. Is this a glimpse of the future?
Witness stories of resilience and ambition unfold across Asia this March on CNA. In Singapore, 5 food entrepreneurs confront the true cost of survival in a relentless F&B scene.
And you see your bank account kind of dwindling down, and I've got 2 young kids. It's a scary feeling.
Faced with daily operational pressures, how far would they go to chase a dream? In the long game. In November 2025, a catastrophic fire in Hong Kong killed more than 100 residents. Even as homes and hopes were destroyed, survivors came together to reclaim their lives. Witness a community rising from the ashes of loss in After the Fire. And enter the arena of innovation as 36 participants overcome a series of challenges to design, build and pilot drones and robots. Who will be crowned champions of the very first CNA Tech Challenge. This March on CNA.
Ever tried to book driving classes or train tickets only to find everything booked out in seconds?
So I'm not doing anything, this is all the bots doing it. Wow.
And you don't even need to know how to make one, as bots are available online.
The bots can actually pass this image to an AI model to overcome this capture.
What can we do to beat a bot? Talking Point, Sunday on CNA.
He walked away from a steady paycheck.
Corporate job is just do for money because you want to get paid.
She runs 6 ice cream shops to fund her university degree. Plus, from a rental flat kitchen to 3 tons of chicken a month. And a BTO on the way. Money Mind, Wednesday on CNA.
Japan is calling for the immediate release of 2 of its citizens detained in Iran, in an issue separate from the ongoing conflict. Tokyo confirming that a second Japanese national is being held, in addition to a man arrested in Tehran before the war. Reports suggest the first detainee may be the Tehran bureau chief of Japan's public broadcaster, NHK, although officials have not confirmed his identity. Japan says it's continuing to work to secure their release.
これら、2名の邦人とはですね、連絡が取れておりまして、現時点で安全であるということは確認をいたしております。
The former Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai will not be appealing his 20-year sentence for his national security conviction. The 78-year-old founder of the now defunct Apple Daily newspaper was found guilty last month under a Beijing-imposed national security law. A Hong Kong appellate court recently overturned separate fraud convictions against Lai, the sentences for which have already been served. Lai has been detained since 2020, since a crackdown on pro-democracy protests the year before. But the US and UK have called for his release. Mr. Lai is a British citizen. China, however, maintains that Lai is a Chinese citizen. Humanoid robots back flipping their way into stardom at this year's Chinese Spring Festival Gala. The acrobatics are built by Unitree, one of China's leading humanoid robotics companies. This display sparking a question: how far ahead are Chinese robots? CNA's weekly current affairs program Insight takes a closer look at progress in robotics.
Before their grand display at the Spring Festival Gala, Insight was given a glimpse of the G1's high-flying skills. But as impressive as the machine martial arts was, the G1 did not perform these actions on its own. The moves were pre-programmed.
目前我们的机器人还是通过遥控的方式，但是目前的机器人不能像人类一样有大脑思考的能力，去完成一些自主决策的任务。
But elsewhere in Shenzhen, one company is working to solve that. X Square Robot is building a robotics brain using AI.
首先 ，OSS 是我们开源的这样一个具身操作的大模型，它是输入机器人看到的画面、机器人的状态，然后直接输出机器人未来一段时间要采取的动作。对，这就是这个模型的一个基本情况。这里我给它输入了一个指令，让它把水果和餐具放到2个不同的盘子上面，然后我们的机器人收到我的指令之后，它就会自己去做判断。首先，它会推理哪些是水果，它会，然后它会自己去对它进行操作。这个有点像教小孩子拿筷子一样，就是做操作一样。就是现在大家比较主流的做机器人的方法，就是你通过遥操作的设备先教会这个机器人。然后该怎么样去拿一个杯子，该怎么样去折叠衣服，该怎么样去拿起一个方块，对，然后之后积累了足够的数据之后，模型就可以学会怎么样自主的去完成这个任务。所以在最开始你需要通过这样的方式去采集。
There's a robotics boom happening across China. And the new generation of robots being developed by the likes of X Square are different from the automatons of yesteryear. Typically, traditional robots were programmed to follow fixed rules and repeat predefined actions. Instead of following rigid instructions, X Square's robots take inputs from cameras or voice commands and decide for themselves what action to perform. This is described as embodied artificial intelligence, AI that learns and operates through a physical body interacting with the real world.
具身人工智能呢，实际上是指和我们人体所相似的这种人工智能的形态。那么这种形态的出现呢，是2025年呢，具身人工智能或者也可以说叫具身机器人的行业呀，变得更加的流行，甚至出现了市场化的端倪。
Last year, embodied artificial intelligence was mentioned for the first time at China's Two Sessions meeting, signaling governmental priority. So, to train robotic AI, training centers have opened across China. By the end of last year, more than 24 data collection facilities were in operation.
These training centers are specifically designed to help local startups, particularly the humanoid robotic startups, to prototype their design, to fine-tune their robots, and be able to roll out their robots to the market as soon as possible to shorten that time to market.
The world is in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, a period of widespread economic transformation driven by technology. Last year, 16,000 humanoid robots were installed worldwide in factories and warehouses. Chinese companies accounted for 4 in 5 of them.
主要是因为中国发现了机器人，它是第4轮产业工业革命一个重中之重的核心技术和核心产品。那么更重要的也发现了未来中国这个发展进程中，如果更多的采用机器人的这个运作模式，那么中国的经济和社会运行的效率还会更高。对于在未来的大国竞争中将会处在一个更好的一个位置。
And you can catch the full Inside episode, China's Robot Revolution, on CNA Video on Demand or CNA Insider's YouTube page. And that's Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia. Plus, we're on Facebook and YouTube.